So, today is Friday and I feel absolutely fucking amazing. It is insane. And this is quite always the case after I've worked out. It is a common theme that I've seen in my life and in not quite forever, but since I'm working out and I've been working out for quite some time or I've been doing sports for quite some time, even though I gotta have to be honest. If it is some really intense cardio, like, I don't know, playing soccer, for example, which I might be doing today as well, even though I've been working out for 3 hours quite very inefficiently. And it's been one of the shittiest workouts that I've had in quite some while. But I've also, I've also didn't really feel like working out, but that's another topic. It's amazing how you feel afterwards. It really is. And, is potentially, well, it quite is one of the reasons why I would definitely say work out and do some sports and be active. Do something, create something, make something with your body, whether it is yoga, whether it is some running, whether it is cycling, whether it is whatever. Move your fucking body. Your body is created to be fucking moved, no matter fucking what. So yeah, also in the rain, by the way, I mean, there's also benefits to that. And there's, by the way, also benefits to doing some things that you just don't want to do. Some mental grit, or grit as Angela Duckworth, I guess she's called, was writing about. And I think it is amazing. I think it is a cool thing. Anyway, today is not going to be about grit, but today's video is going to be about human kindness. I've actually done the work of, searching for some articles that I think are worth going through. At least, rated and or decided by their titles and the overall theme and or topic they are about, which I think definitely is the case when it comes to human kindness. I mean, deep down, most people are pretty decent, which is the sub-headline of this article. And I think it is a great sub-headline, and I, because of that, think it is a great article, or hope that it is a great article, because it views humanity and humans and human beings as, something rather positive. Opposite to, okay, everyone is shit and everyone should be hated because we're such motherfuckers, because we are so bad. Which, to some degree definitely is also the case. One could definitely argument, for this view of the world. But at my point of view, being more positive about things and, in general, being positive makes sense and is a good thing and is, something to be practiced, something that's worth being practiced. But anyway, let's actually see what the article is all about. So the article is written by Larry Culliford, Culliford, and as always, the link is going to be down in the description. So if you don't, want to watch this video or listen to the podcast, then please check out the article at least. You're going to be way faster, of course. You're not going to have the convenience of maybe listening to it and doing something else in the meantime. But yeah, anyway. So after stealing a boat in June 1965, 6 teenage schoolboys were shipwrecked in a violent Pacific storm, arriving at a small deserted island 8 days later. They were rescued by extraordinary luck, but not until September the following year. At the outset, they made a pact never to quarrel, separating to opposite ends of the island for a few hours to claim their aggression whenever friction arose. They created a food garden, hollowed out tree trunks to store rainwater, kept chickens in pens, made a kind of gymnasium and a badminton court, and also lit a fire, managing to keep it alight for more than a year, which is insane, by the way. I mean, there's going to be rain and heavy wind and whatever. At the end, they were all in peak condition, including one boy's perfectly healed broken leg. This heartening story runs counter to the grim fictional tale of William Golding's 20th century classic book, The Lord of the Flies, which may have sold tens of millions of copies but turns out to be completely misleading. Fake news. The contrast between two tales is made by Dutch author and journalist Rutger Bregman, or Rutger Bregman, however you pronounce it, I don't know. In his recent book, Humankind, in his book Humankind. To check out the Tongan boy's account, he even went to Australia to interview the sea captain who found them and one of those survivors living nearby. These two were firm friends still 50 years later, which is insane. Bergman's central idea, backed by evidence and anecdotes, is that most people deep down are pretty decent. Negative views and opposing ideas like most people think most other people can't be trusted probably prevail, he says, because of an unhealthy addiction to news, quote unquote, news, but in scare quotes. That is designed less to inform than to grab attention, hence its relentless focus on human misdeeds and suffering. People are not naturally combative, whatever. Taking his readers through an account of human evolution, he maintains that although struggle and competition clearly factor, cooperation is much more critical, and it has always been. Which is a side note by me, by the way, and I've been talking about it before. I've been going through evolutionary books, evolutionary psychology books, and whatnot, and yes, indeed, I mean, there is a reason why it feels good to help other people. And everyone likes that, and everybody feels good by helping other people. It is just what it is, and there must be a reason for that. And now we could argue, okay, it is because of this or it is because of that. There's also, well, you probably also have an own opinion on that, why we feel good doing something for somebody else. Maybe deep down one could say as well, it's just because we think that we're going to get something out of it and we're going to profit off of it. Well, yeah, it's a valid opinion and a valid option. But anyway, blah, 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 blah. Humans find ourselves in difficulties, though, because of a fatal flaw. As social animals, we feel more affinity for people like us. People like us do things like this, as Seth Godin really likes to say, which, is a very, very well thought out marketing concept. People like us do things like this. And now you can fill in the blanks. What are the people like us, or who are the people like us, and what do they do? Forgetting that, ultimately, we are alike and powerfully connected, giving in to partisan. Us versus them thinking explains why we make enemies and do bad things to them. We are certain people that do certain things, and the other people are certain people that do certain other things, which might also be the underlying, as I'm thinking about it, the underlying concept of racism. I am white and I'm doing things like this, and the other person is whatever other skin color and is doing things like that, which may or may not be different than things that I do. Of course, other cultures are doing different things or other cultures are doing things in a different way. We all are cooking, but we are using different equipment, we're using different food, we're using different techniques. And of course, if I say, okay, we like people that are like us, then yeah, there might be a reason for disliking other cultures or ethnicities. Well, I don't want to talk about races because, it's the human race. But, well, I think cultures makes the most sense here. Anyway, I think you know what I mean. So, yeah. This does not always work to our advantage. Though, for example, according to Bregman, bombing people, whether during the London Blitz or in Vietnam, far from demoralizing people, strengthens their resolve and encourages cooperation. There's also good evidence that in battle most soldiers never fire their guns. We are basically peace-loving. The inhabitants of the Bahamas were totally peaceful and entirely ignorant of weapons until Columbus showed up in 1492. Similarly, non-violent people totally abhorrent of bloodshed were found on the Pacific island of Ifalik after World War II. Yeah, why? What's the benefit of that? What is the benefit of killing each another? How could that be helpful? What's the benefit of that? If you think about ancient times, if you think back to ancient times, then I think it becomes a bit more clear. Imagining there is a big ass dinosaur, and it is attacking you. Okay, cooperation makes sense because the chances of you getting killed if you don't do so are very high. If you think about predator and victim quite, which I think is an example that I've brought up very, very often, but I think it is quite valid. So cooperation makes sense regarding that. Your chances are way better of surviving if you're dealing with certain things in a group. On the other hand, if another person is threatening you, then it also clearly makes sense to kill them because you are threatened. If this person is threatening your life, is trying to kill you, well, yeah, it makes sense. If you really think about ancient times, and something else that I've been talking about before is killing each and another basically is quite normal. Nowadays, because of society and because of laws and because of certain viewpoints of life, it's not, But if you really think back to ancient times, when dinosaurs were alive, or we were the Neanderthals, or however you call them, it was perfectly fine, and it was just life. We all have been quite animals, and we all have just been trying to survive. And of course, when somebody threatens you, then, what should you do but either fight or flight? On the other hand, kind of returning to the original point, peace makes sense, because what is the benefit of killing each and another? Anyway, of course, you can really think about all different kinds of scenarios where, bloodshed makes sense, and where peace makes sense, and where whatever makes sense. But it is a difficult topic. It really is. So what went wrong? For Bergman, civilization has many good points, but the problem started with the advent of settlements and private property, as a result of which the 1% began oppressing the 99%, and smooth talkers ascended from commanders to generals, and from chieftains to kings. The days of liberty, equality, and fraternity were over. Which, if you once again think back to ancient times, is a good point, because back in the days we all have been equal in terms of what we were quite able to achieve, to survive, basically, Maybe, of course, some people were more gifted physically or mentally, which, is about genetics now, but we all had the same opportunities, quite. We all were living on the same planet. Maybe, of course, some people were living in this place and some people were living in that place. But yeah. Anyway, this excellent book goes on to debunk several other myths. The real story of Easter Island is of a resourceful and resilient people, not a tale of impending or impeding doom, but a wellspring of hope. Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiments deliberately and fraudulently turned a scientific experiment, which is a quote, by the way, into a staged production. Milgram's shock machine subjects were extensively coerced into using high voltage settings on purported victims to the point of lasting psychological trauma in several well-attested cases. The cries of Catherine Susan Genovese, attacked repeatedly at 3:15 a.m. in New York in 1964, were not ignored by 38 bystanders, and she did not die alone. Bregman concludes, how out of whack our view of human nature often is, how deftly journalists push those buttons to sell sensational stories, and how it is precisely in emergencies that we can count on one another. Yeah, quite. I just thought, well, if there really is an emergency, would we help? What are the chances of helping? If you really see somebody dying, well, it's very difficult to say, and it really is a difficult subject because, there's two sides. There are two sides. One is saying, okay, we are really good, and the other one is saying, okay, we are really bad, which, yeah, either one of those might be influenced by either this article or by anything else or everything else that we have been exposed to as a society, news and whatever other influences. So it's difficult to say, and it's difficult to conclude whether one or the other is the quote-unquote truth. So, maybe something in the middle might be kind of the way to go, but who knows? Anyway, rather than unspeakable villains, as propaganda usually has it, Bergman says our enemies are just like us, led by war criminals, for example. Terrorists kill and die for each other, feeling part of something bigger so that their lives finally hold meaning. Religion is an afterthought. To be clear, he adds, this is no excuse for their crimes. It's an explanation. Power is like a drug. It appears to work like an anesthetic that makes you insensate to other people. Well, yeah, it's definitely a psychological phenomenon, if you want to call it a phenomenon, or a psychological discussion, I think. Yeah. These are ideas worth reflecting on, as are those found in later chapters addressing questions like, what if schools and businesses, cities and nations expect the best of people instead of presuming their worst? To answer it, there is a description of a highly successful Dutch healthcare organization run by someone who sees his employees as intrinsically motivated professionals and experts on how their jobs ought to be done, and is therefore a manager who prefers not to manage. Later, about children, education, and the need for play, Bregman writes, over the past decades, the intrinsic motivation of children has been systematically stifled, and science has now supplied a mountain of evidence that unstructured, risky play is good for children's physical and mental well-being. Depression, else, he adds, derives from a shortage of what makes life meaningful, a shortage of play. And if you think about it, playing, and well, I think he's not referring to playing video games, even though I think as I move on with my point might be also something to think about. I guess playing is about being in a certain state. I would consider it being a flow state, a state in which you don't feel time moving slowly, which is a very, very, very bad and unnecessarily difficult construction of saying, well, if you play games, time passes by really, really quickly because you enjoy it. And I think it's a really tremendously amazing and important state to be in, this flow state, the flow state of, okay, well, is it a flow state? I don't know. Well, I think so. I don't know the definition at this point, but I think it is. Or just being in a state where time passes by really quickly because you enjoy what you're doing. And I think this is definitely what is happening when you're playing, opposed to, working, even though it's difficult because sometimes you work, but it feels like playing because you enjoy working so much, or you enjoy your work so much. Anyway. Blah, 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 blah. Bregman is critical of contemporary democracy, which ignores that people tend to be constructive and conscientious. Rather than being selfish, they tend to share readily. At the biological level, we are all kin of the same kind in a way that makes kindness natural and good. Using the example of South Africans' avoidance of bloodshed at the ending of the apartheid era, Bregman describes the essential part of the remedy as contact. Putting people together for long enough to get used to one another, suspicion dies and bonding spontaneously occurs. COVID-19 arriving during a period of global destabilization associated with multiple interrelated factors, including climate change and mass movements of both refugees and economic migrants, offers an unparalleled invitation and opportunity for people as individuals and collectively to reflect upon and revise their values, ambitions, plans, and priorities, even if for the time being we cannot actually get together for discussing and mutual support. Writing in a style that is relatively informal and personal, almost conversational, making it easy to read, there could hardly be a more appropriate, timely, and helpful book as Humankind. Bravo Bergman, I say. Copyright Larry Culliford. Larry's new title, The Book of Wisdom, was published by Hero Press on March blah blah blah. See his website and go check out the book. I do want to repeat the first part of it because an excellent book for our time, Humankind, A Hopeful History. After stealing a boat in June 1965, 16 schoolboys were shipwrecked in a violent Pacific storm, arriving at a small deserted island 8 days later. They were rescued by extraordinary luck, but not until September the following year. I don't know where this story is coming from. I really didn't get it out of the, out of the article, to be honest. This heartening story runs counter to millions of copies, but turns out to be completely misleading. Fake news. Yeah, anyway, gonna end the episode there. I wish you the best. Please stay safe and please be kind. Gonna see you the next time. Bye bye. See you.